My husband thought he could cheat with his boss and get away with it, until I used my secret shares to destroy both their careers. They say betrayal stings the most when it comes from the person you trust blindly. For me, it wasn't just a sting. It was an explosion, one I walked straight into. I found them at the Golden Elm Hotel. I wish I could say it was an accident, but deep down, I think I already knew. Too many late nights, too many excuses, too many business trips that started to feel like getaways. That evening, something inside me snapped. When he didn't pick up the phone for the third time, I drove to the hotel where his company's event was supposedly winding down. I told myself I just wanted to say goodnight. Instead, I found my world crashing down. I saw him first, my husband, dressed a little too sharply, laughing as he walked down the hallway with her. His boss, the woman who smiled at me at every office dinner, the woman whose perfume I'd noticed on his shirts more than once. They didn't see me at first, lost in each other. Her hand slid onto his waist, his arm around her shoulders. Then, in the middle of the empty hallway, he kissed her. Not the way you'd greet a colleague, but the way a man kisses a woman he's been wanting all night. I stepped out from behind the column, my heels loud on the marble floor. He froze mid-kiss. She pulled away, her face going from playful to pale in seconds. "So this is what late meetings look like?" I said, voice shaking but loud. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. My husband stared at me, mouth opening and closing, searching for a lie he could throw over the disaster unfolding between us. "It's not what it looks like," he finally stammered. His boss tried to speak, but I cut her off. "You don't, not a single word. This is between me and my husband." I locked eyes with him, daring him to deny what I'd just seen. For a moment, we all just stood there. The hallway seemed to shrink. I could see the sweat on his forehead, the way his hand still trembled after letting go of her. My heart was pounding so loudly I thought it might drown out the ugly silence. He reached for me, maybe to explain, maybe just to pretend he could fix this with a touch. I stepped back. "How long has this been going on?" I demanded. "How long have you been lying to me? Or are all those overtime projects just hotel room reservations?" He looked desperate. "Please, it's complicated. I didn't mean—" "Don't," I interrupted, voice hard. "I want the truth. Right now. Or I walk out and you'll never see me again." For the first time in years, he looked truly afraid. He glanced at his boss, who suddenly seemed much smaller, hiding behind her designer handbag and fake concern. It started after the company retreat," he whispered, eyes pleading. "I was going to end it. Spare me," I snapped. "You weren't going to end anything. You were just hoping I'd stay blind." He tried to step forward again, but I stood my ground. "You lied to me, to my face, in my home." The anger rising in my chest was almost enough to drown out the heartbreak. Almost. I turned to his boss, finally letting all the venom I'd swallowed pour out. "You're his boss. Was this your idea of leadership? Or do you always prey on married men?" She shrank back, cheeks flushed. "This was a mistake," she began, but I didn't let her finish. "No," I said. "A mistake is a one-night stand. This is a choice, repeated, deliberate." My husband tried again. "Please, let's go home. We can talk." I shook my head. "Number, I want you to know something. I'm not the fool you think I am. This ends now. Both of you." My voice was cold, measured, final. I walked away before he could follow, heels echoing in the hallway. In that moment, the pain in my chest was joined by a sudden, icy clarity. I would not beg. I would not break down in front of them. Let them watch me walk away. Let that be the last image burned into their memories. As I drove home, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. Eyes red, but unbroken. I knew what I had to do next. No more pretending. No more waiting. If they thought they'd won, they had no idea who they were dealing with. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning. The drive home felt like moving through a storm without any shelter. My hands gripped the wheel until my knuckles turned white, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. Rage, humiliation, and a strange, steely calm washed over me in waves. I kept replaying the confrontation in that hotel hallway, the look on his face, the fear and guilt he couldn't hide. For once, I held the power, and I intended to keep it. When I arrived home, the silence was suffocating. Every picture on the wall, every souvenir from vacations past, seemed to mock the life I thought we'd built together. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the spot where he usually dropped his jacket, remembering every time he'd told me he was working late, every lie that now felt so obvious. He came home almost an hour later, quieter than usual. I was in the living room, lights on, waiting. He paused in the doorway, as if unsure whether to enter his own house. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The distance between us was a wall neither of us wanted to cross. He started with a sigh. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer at first. I wanted him to sweat, to feel just a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. When I finally met his eyes, I saw the desperation there, the fear of losing control. "You want to talk?" I said, voice steady. "Talk then, but don't lie. I'll know." He looked down, swallowing hard. "I know what I did was wrong. I never wanted to hurt you. I got lost. Work was stressful, and she was there." I nearly laughed at the cliché. "So what now? You want forgiveness? A clean slate?" He shook his head, eyes shining. "No, I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know it wasn't about you. It was me, my mistakes." I let him speak, but inside I was cataloging every word, every excuse. He tried to take my hand, but I pulled away. "Stop," I said. "You don't get to comfort me, not tonight." The tension sat heavy between us. I could see he wanted to beg, to bargain. But something in my face must have told him it was pointless. I stood up, suddenly exhausted. "You will sleep in the guest room," I told him. "Tomorrow we will figure out what happens next. But do not insult me by asking for another chance. I need time and space." He nodded, shoulders slumped, and retreated down the hallway. For the first time in years, I felt alone in my own house. But I also felt something else. Relief. The game was over, the masks were off. That night, as I lay in bed, the anger simmered into something colder. I started thinking about everything he'd risked. Not just our marriage, but our future, our stability, even his own career. His affair wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was reckless and stupid, and it gave me leverage I hadn't realized I had. I opened my laptop and began searching. I looked into his company, the shareholders, and the tangled relationships between the board, his boss, and the staff. I thought about what would happen if the affair came to light. I thought about the investments I'd quietly made, the money I'd put into the company through a third party years ago. I had power here, more than he could ever imagine. If he thought he could move on with her, keep his job, or sweep this under the rug, he was wrong. I wasn't going to ruin myself for his mistakes. I was going to make sure the truth hurt him where it mattered most. The next morning, I watched him leave for work, nervous, subdued, not meeting my eyes. I played the role of the composed, silent wife, but my mind was 1,000 steps ahead. I started collecting proof, emails, receipts, anything that tied him and his boss together. I contacted my lawyer, not for divorce, at least not yet, but to understand exactly what I was entitled to if I played my cards right. I knew he'd expect me to fall apart, to rage or collapse, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Instead, I planned. I waited. And I learned. He had underestimated me. They both had. And soon they would learn that betrayal is a double-edged sword. And I was done bleeding. The days after the confrontation settled into a tense, uneasy routine. My husband walked on eggshells, tiptoeing around the house, speaking only when necessary. Each morning he left for work early, and each evening he came home late, offering flimsy excuses I no longer bothered to challenge. I could sense the fear in his eyes every time our paths crossed. He knew the truth was no longer his secret to keep. But while he tried to pretend everything could go back to normal, I focused on something far more important. Arming myself with facts, with proof, with leverage. No more blind trust, no more playing the fool. I started with his phone, careful not to arouse suspicion. He'd become more guarded. changing his passwords and carrying his devices everywhere. But technology leaves traces. I dug through old backup files, email records, cloud storage. It was all there. Hotel confirmations, late-night messages, even half-deleted selfies with his boss. I forwarded everything to a private folder, building a digital arsenal that would be impossible for him to explain away. Next, I turned my attention to the company. Years ago, I had invested in the business through a discreet holding company, quietly buying up shares until I became one of the significant, though silent, stakeholders. My husband never cared about the details. He was too busy climbing the corporate ladder to notice the hand that helped stabilize it from behind. Now, I reached out to the board's secretary, arranging a lunch, to discuss some investment opportunities. It was an innocent pretense, but it got me access to the right people and, more importantly, to the company's inner workings. I learned how respected his boss was among the shareholders, how her reputation for results masked her predatory behavior, and how rumors about office affairs had begun to circulate, though no one dared speak openly. In those meetings, I was careful, never hinting at what I knew, never letting emotion slip into my voice. I played the part of a curious investor, asking strategic questions, listening more than I spoke. The more I learned, the clearer my next steps became. At home, I continued my act. I treated my husband with cold politeness, sharing only what was necessary, never offering comfort or confrontation. Sometimes he tried to apologize again, but I shut him down with a look or a quiet "not now." I could see the cracks in his confidence growing. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence. A credit card bill here, a calendar reminder there, fragments of conversation overheard when he thought I wasn't listening. I even found an old gift receipt for a necklace, a brand I never wore. The details came together like puzzle pieces, each one sharpening my anger into a weapon. But it wasn't just about punishment anymore. I wanted justice. I wanted control. And for the first time since the night I caught them, I realized I held the advantage. I contacted my lawyer again, this time to discreetly inquire about board voting rights and the protocols for calling an emergency shareholders meeting. I needed to understand every rule, every loophole. I read through the company's bylaws late into the night, memorizing the power structure, mapping out exactly where my influence began and ended. All the while, my husband remained clueless. He mistook my silence for defeat, my calm for surrender. He went about his life, nervous but still clinging to hope that I would eventually let this go. He had no idea that every move he made, every late-night text, every nervous glance at his phone was being recorded, analyzed, and stored away for the day I would need it most. And as the pieces fell into place, I realized something had shifted inside me. I was no longer just a betrayed wife. I was becoming the architect of my own revenge. I was almost ready. All I needed was the right moment to strike. And I knew it was coming soon. The day of the shareholders' meeting arrived faster than I expected. For the first time in weeks, I dressed with intention, confident, composed. A sharp contrast to the woman who'd once begged for honesty in a dark hallway. Today, I wasn't here as someone's wife. I was here as a major investor, a silent force stepping out of the shadows to claim what was rightfully mine. The room buzzed with anticipation as the board gathered. My husband was already there, tense and fidgety, eyes darting to the door every few seconds. His boss sat at the head of the table, all corporate grace and steel nerves, unaware that her entire career was about to unravel. I entered quietly, but didn't go unnoticed. Whispers broke out among the board members. Some recognized me, but none knew the real reason I was there. I took my seat, meeting my husband's eyes just long enough to let him know that everything was about to change. The meeting began with the usual reports, numbers, projections, safe topics everyone could nod along to. When it was my turn to speak, I cleared my throat and addressed the room in a calm, steady voice. "There's an issue that demands our attention," I began. "One that concerns not just company integrity, but the reputation and future of everyone in this room." All eyes turned to me. My husband stiffened. His boss barely flinched, but I saw a flicker of doubt cross her face. I opened my folder and slid the first piece of evidence across the table. hotel receipts, time-stamped messages, photos. These documents, I said, prove that the head of operations has been engaged in a long-term affair with a subordinate, my husband. This isn't just personal betrayal. It's a breach of ethics and company policy, one that puts all of us at risk. A stunned silence followed. The board erupted in murmurs. My husband's boss went pale. My husband tried to speak, but I cut him off. Save it, I said coldly. We're past apologies. The facts are all here. I suggest the board take immediate action to protect the company's interests. There was chaos, accusations flying, denials crumbling under the weight of irrefutable proof. In that chaos, I stood apart, calm, resolute, refusing to flinch. Eventually, the board voted. His boss was removed. My husband was suspended pending investigation. The fallout was swift and public. Emails circulated, statements released, careers ending in real time. When the dust settled, my husband tried to catch up to me in the corridor, desperation written all over his face. Please, let's talk. I made a mistake, but we can fix this. I didn't even slow down. You made your choices. Now I'm making mine. He looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. Maybe he was. I felt strangely free. That evening, I met with my lawyer one last time. I filed for divorce, secured my financial interests, and made sure the house, the assets, and my future were mine alone. For the first time in years, I felt the weight lift from my shoulders. In the days that followed, friends and colleagues reached out, some with pity, some with admiration. I realized my story wasn't just about betrayal. It was about power, about refusing to be a victim, about reclaiming my narrative from those who tried to write me out. I walked away from the ruins of my old life with my head held high. Betrayal had nearly broken me, but in the end, it forged me into someone stronger, sharper, and utterly unafraid to fight for herself. Sometimes, losing everything is exactly what you need to remember who you really are. I didn't just survive my husband's affair. I won. And I'll never let anyone make me feel powerless again.